Chapter 1. The Unlikely Proposal. Life had never been particularly thrilling for Jack Thompson. As an engineer aboard the Nova Rider, a Terran space freighter, his days were consumed by oil-stained hands, malfunctioning circuits, and the dull hum of hyperspace engines. In his quiet moments, he'd dream of adventure, but deep down, he knew that those fantasies were reserved for the brave, for warriors and soldiers, not for people like him. Jack was good at fixing things, machines, electronics, and occasionally, people's broken spirits. But that was where his talents ended. Or so he thought. The galaxy was vast, mysterious, and dangerous. Most humans who ventured out into the stars did so with caution. They were the newcomers, the youngest species in a galaxy teeming with empires thousands of years old. The Valtorian Empire, in particular, was one of the most feared. The Valtorians were a proud, warlike species, known for their advanced technology, strict hierarchy, and imposing physical presence. Their royal family was the stuff of legend, brutal in battle, relentless in politics. Humans, by comparison, were ants crawling around their celestial feet. Jack had heard stories about the Valtorians since he first left Earth. They were considered both awe-inspiring and terrifying, depending on who you asked. Few humans had ever interacted with them directly. The Valtorians had little interest in Earth, seeing humanity as a minor blip in the grand scheme of the cosmos. Yet fate, it seemed, had a different plan for Jack. It was a routine supply run that brought the Nova Rider to the outskirts of an uncharted star system. The mission was simple: deliver a shipment of energy cells to a mining colony on the edge of Terran-controlled space and return home. Easy, or so it appeared at first. The distress signal came in suddenly. Jack was in the engine room, doing his usual checks when the red emergency lights flashed, and the voice of Captain Monroe crackled through the intercom. "Attention, crew. We've received a distress call from an unidentified ship. All hands on deck. Jack, report to the bridge." Jack wiped the sweat from his brow and rushed to the command center, wondering what kind of ship would need help in such a desolate part of space. When he arrived, Captain Monroe was staring intently at the ship's main display. "What's going on?" Jack asked, catching his breath. Monroe gestured at the screen. "We've got a big problem. That distress call? It's coming from a Valtorian royal transport." Jack's heart skipped a beat. "Valtorians? Are you sure?" Monroe nodded grimly. "Positive. Their ship is critically damaged. Looks like they got caught in a cosmic storm. They're barely holding it together." The thought of coming face to face with the Valtorians made Jack's stomach turn. These were the galaxy's apex predators, and they were known for their ruthlessness. If something went wrong, even a minor miscommunication, they could easily wipe the Nova Rider out of existence. But if they ignored the distress signal, they'd be in violation of intergalactic law. There was no choice. "We'll approach with caution," Monroe said. "Jack, you're the best engineer we've got. I need you to help them fix their systems. But stay on your toes. These people aren't known for their patience." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. He wasn't a soldier, but in moments like this, he wished he had the courage of one. As the Nova Rider closed in on the Valtorian ship, Jack could see it was in bad shape. The royal transport, once a sleek and imposing vessel, was now a mangled mess of scorched metal and flickering lights. Its engine core was sputtering, barely maintaining power. Docking procedures initiated, came the automated voice of the ship's AI. The Valtorians responded, granting the Nova Rider permission to board. As the airlocks cycled open, Jack braced himself for what lay ahead. A squad of Valtorian guards met him at the entrance. They were towering figures, each standing at least 7 feet tall, with muscular builds and faces covered in intricate tribal tattoos. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim lighting, giving them a predatory, almost otherworldly appearance. One of the guards stepped forward, his voice deep and commanding. "You are the human engineer?" Jack nodded. "That's right. I'm here to help with your systems. I understand you're in trouble." The guard studied him for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You will speak directly to the king. Follow me." Jack swallowed hard as the guard led him deeper into the ship. The corridors were dimly lit, and the air was thick with tension. He passed other Valtorians, each one casting curious, if slightly disdainful, glances at the lone human walking among them. They were a proud race, and it was clear they didn't think much of a human being tasked with saving their royal ship. After what felt like an eternity, Jack was brought into the throne room, or what was left of it. The once grand chamber had been severely damaged in the storm, with broken pillars and sparking wires hanging from the ceiling. At the center of the room sat King Rathalos, the ruler of the Valtorian Empire. He was an imposing figure, even for a Valtorian. His skin was a deep, bluish gray, and his eyes burned with the intensity of 1,000 suns. He wore a battle-worn crown and sat on a makeshift throne, glaring at Jack as if sizing him up. Beside him stood Princess Talia, the king's only daughter. Jack had heard rumors of her before. Whispers throughout the galaxy suggested she was, well, not traditionally beautiful. In fact, many said she was cursed with hideous features, a sharp contrast to the rest of her race, known for their striking looks. But Jack, standing in the midst of the chaos, was too focused on the task at hand to pay much attention to her. "You are the human who has come to fix my ship?" Rathalos's voice was a low growl. "Yes, your majesty," Jack replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm here to repair your systems. I'll need access to the engine room and control panels." The king's eyes narrowed, but he gave a curt nod. "Do what you must, but if you fail, well, let's just say it will be the last thing you ever do." Jack felt the weight of the king's words settle like a heavy stone in his gut. He couldn't afford to mess this up. With a quick nod, he hurried to the engine room, where the damage was far worse than he had anticipated. Sparks flew from exposed wires, and the core itself was leaking energy at an alarming rate. But Jack wasn't the best engineer on the Nova Rider for nothing. He quickly got to work, patching leaks, rerouting power, and stabilizing the core. It was an intense few hours, but eventually, the engine hummed back to life, steady and strong. When Jack returned to the throne room, the king rose to his feet, his expression still unreadable. "You have saved my ship, human," Rathalos said slowly, as if the words pained him. "For that, you will be rewarded." Jack wasn't sure what to expect. Perhaps some Valtorian treasure or a diplomatic token. But what came next left him completely stunned. "You will marry my daughter, Princess Talia." Jack blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. He glanced at the princess, who stood silently beside her father, her features hidden beneath a heavy hood. What?" Jack stammered, his mind racing. "Your Majesty, with all due respect, I'm just an engineer. I don't dash." "You will marry her," Rathalos repeated, his voice leaving no room for argument. "It is the custom of our people. A life-saving debt must be repaid with an eternal bond. You have saved us, human, and now you will join the royal family." Jack's world spun as he processed the gravity of the situation. He had wanted adventure, but this was beyond anything he could have ever imagined. Chapter 2. A Royal Bond. Jack stood frozen in place, the enormity of the situation crashing down on him like a collapsing star. Marry the princess? His gaze flickered to Princess Talia, her face still concealed beneath the deep hood she wore. He tried to process the absurdity of it all. Saving a Valtorian ship was one thing. This was something else entirely. A royal marriage? Was he being rewarded or punished? I don't think you understand, Your Majesty," Jack said, his voice coming out shakier than he'd intended. I am just an engineer. A simple Terran. This isn't. Surely there must be a better option for Dash." The king's eyes darkened, his towering presence leaning forward in his throne. "Do you reject the honor I bestow upon you, human? Do you spit on the royal customs of Valtor?" Jack's throat tightened. Rejecting a royal gift was no small matter, and from what little he knew of Valtorian culture, it could easily be seen as an insult punishable by death or worse. He knew of entire planetary colonies that had vanished from the galactic maps after offending the Valtorian Empire. "And no, Your Majesty. Of course, I'm honored, deeply honored." Jack's words tumbled out in a rush as he tried to salvage the situation. "But I'm not sure I'm qualified for this. I'm not a noble or Dash. You saved my ship. You saved my daughter." King Rathalos's voice thundered, cutting Jack off. "That is more than enough qualification. Our laws are clear. Your life and hers are now bound. Whether you are Terran or Valtorian makes no difference. You will be given the title of royal consort. The moment the bond is made official, You will ascend to the highest rank in the Empire, second only to me. Refuse, and you insult the crown." A cold sweat broke out across Jack's forehead. There was no escape. He had walked into a trap without even realizing it, a trap built by the ironclad traditions of one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. His mind raced, searching for some way to delay, to think his way out of this, but every path led to the same conclusion. Refusal would be suicide. He swallowed hard and looked at the king. I accept." The words tasted foreign on his tongue. He could hardly believe he just agreed to marry a woman he hadn't even seen. A woman who, according to rumors, was, well, Jack didn't want to be disrespectful, but ugly was the word that came to mind. The king gave a curt nod, satisfied. "Good. The wedding ceremony will take place tomorrow. You will be given quarters to prepare." Before Jack could even protest or ask what exactly preparing entailed, the guards had already stepped forward. One of them, a particularly tall and intimidating Valtorian warrior, grabbed Jack by the arm, though not forcefully, and gestured for him to follow. As Jack was led away, his mind buzzed with questions and anxieties. What had he just agreed to? Could there still be a way out? And why, of all the humans in the galaxy, had this happened to him? The corridor they walked through was dark and narrow, with walls lined by cold metallic panels. Every step echoed ominously, making Jack feel even smaller compared to the towering Valtorians around him. Soon, they reached a set of doors that slid open with a hiss, revealing a spacious, ornately decorated room. "These are your quarters," the guard informed him, his voice flat and unemotional. "Prepare yourself for tomorrow's ceremony. The royal advisors will brief you on the customs of our people shortly." Without another word, the guards turned and left, the doors sliding shut behind them. Jack found himself alone in what was undoubtedly the most lavish room he'd ever seen. It was filled with strange, alien art, shimmering fabrics, and exotic plants that glowed faintly in the dim light. But none of it mattered to him. His mind was too preoccupied with the events that had just unfolded. He sank into a chair by the window, staring out into the vastness of space. What had he gotten himself into? His entire life had been simple, predictable. He fixed things. He didn't get involved in galactic politics, let alone marry into one of the most dangerous royal families in the universe. And yet here he was. Hours passed, and Jack had barely moved from the chair. His thoughts swirled in endless circles, going over every possible outcome, every way he could avoid what was about to happen. But the more he thought about it, the clearer it became. There was no way out. He couldn't insult the king, and he couldn't refuse the marriage without risking his life and possibly the lives of his entire crew. Just as despair began to set in, the doors to his quarters slid open again. Jack stood quickly, expecting more guards, but instead, an elderly Valtorian advisor entered. He was dressed in elaborate robes that trailed behind him like the cloak of a wise sage, and his face was lined with age and wisdom. "You are the Terran who will marry our princess," the advisor said, his voice calm but firm. "I am here to explain the significance of what you have agreed to." Jack sighed. "I didn't exactly have a choice." "Few do when it comes to matters of the royal family," the advisor said with a slight smile, though it lacked any real warmth. "But you should know that this is not a curse, human. It is a great honor." "An honor?" Jack scoffed, unable to keep the sarcasm from his voice. "I've heard what people say about Princess Talia. I've heard the rumors." The advisor's expression didn't change. "Yes, the princess has been called many things. She is not considered traditionally beautiful by our people, but that is not her fault. It is a result of an ancient curse placed upon our bloodline centuries ago. The royal family has been marked ever since." Jack blinked. "A curse?" "Yes," the advisor said, his voice lowering as if sharing a deep secret. "Long ago, our ancestors angered a powerful race of ancient beings, and as punishment, the firstborn daughter of every Valtorian king was cursed with a visage that our people find unsettling." Jack's mind raced. He hadn't expected to hear something so mystical. In a galaxy full of advanced technology and science, curses seemed out of place. But then again, the universe was a strange place. "Is there no way to break the curse?" Jack asked, more out of curiosity than anything else. The advisor's eyes gleamed, but his expression remained neutral. "There are many legends, many theories, but none have ever succeeded. Jack rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of the situation grow even heavier. So, I'm marrying a princess who's cursed and considered hideous by her own people, and there's no way to undo it? That is the reality of your situation, yes? Jack slumped back into the chair. Fantastic. The advisor's eyes softened for the first time, a flicker of sympathy crossing his ancient features. Do not be so quick to despair, Taryn. Princess Talia may not be beautiful by our standards, but she is strong, intelligent, and loyal. In time, you may find that she possesses qualities that far surpass physical appearance. Jack wasn't so sure, but before he could respond, the advisor straightened and spoke with more formality. The ceremony will take place tomorrow at dawn. You will be joined with the princess, and your life will change forever. Prepare yourself, human. With that, the advisor turned and left, leaving Jack alone once again. The weight of his impending marriage and the unknown future it held pressed down on him like a crushing force. The night before the wedding, Jack barely slept. His mind was too restless, his thoughts racing with uncertainty. The more he thought about it, the more surreal it seemed. Here he was, a simple engineer from Earth, about to marry a cursed alien princess and become a member of one of the most powerful royal families in the galaxy. The irony wasn't lost on him. Chapter 3. The Royal Ceremony. The day of the wedding dawned with a solemn stillness that filled the air aboard the Valtorian royal vessel. Jack woke up in his luxurious quarters, his body stiff and his mind in turmoil after a sleepless night. He rose slowly from the bed, the reality of his situation sinking in deeper with each passing moment. Today was the day his life would change forever. Today, he would marry Princess Talia, the cursed daughter of King Radhalos. A chime echoed through the room, and Jack turned toward the door just as it slid open to reveal a group of royal attendants. They were dressed in the ceremonial robes of the Valtorian Empire, their expressions blank as they approached him. "Good morning, Taryn," one of the attendants said, her voice formal and cold. "We have been sent to prepare you for the wedding ceremony. The joining will take place in the Hall of the Ancients in 1 hour." Jack felt his stomach tighten. 1 hour. That was all the time he had left as a free man. The attendants motioned for him to follow them into an adjoining room, where an elaborate array of ceremonial garments had been laid out. The robes were made of a shimmering black fabric that seemed to absorb the light around it, and intricate silver embroidery adorned the edges, depicting scenes of Valtorian battles and ancient lore. Jack stood silently as the attendants dressed him in the heavy robes, each layer feeling like another chain tightening around him. When they finished, one of the attendants handed him a small silver circlet. "This is the symbol of your new status as royal consort," she explained. "You will wear this during the ceremony, and afterward, it will be replaced with the crown of your rank." Jack stared at the circlet, feeling the weight of its meaning. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It represented the end of his old life and the beginning of something he hadn't asked for. With a sigh, he placed it on his head, the cool metal pressing against his temples. Once he was fully dressed, the attendants led him down a long, winding corridor that seemed to stretch endlessly. The walls were adorned with tapestries depicting the history of the Valtorian Empire, their victories in war, and the power of their royal bloodline. Jack tried not to think about what awaited him at the end of this hallway. Instead, he focused on the rhythmic sound of his footsteps, the soft shuffle of the attendants' robes, and the faint hum of the ship's engines in the distance. Eventually, they reached the entrance to the Hall of the Ancients. The massive doors were carved from some kind of dark, ancient stone, and towering statues of past Valtorian kings and queens lined the corridor leading inside. The air here felt heavier, almost sacred, as if the very walls were alive with the weight of history. The doors slid open with a low, grinding sound, and Jack's heart skipped a beat. Inside, the hall was filled with the most powerful and elite members of Valtorian society. Nobles, generals, and advisors stood in a solemn semicircle around the center of the room, where a raised platform had been set for the ceremony. At the far end of the platform stood King Radhalos, his towering presence even more imposing in the dim light of the chamber. Beside him stood Princess Talia, still hidden beneath her ceremonial hood and cloak. Jack's feet felt like lead as he was led to the center of the platform. He could feel the eyes of the Valtorian nobles on him, their gazes filled with disdain, curiosity, and even a hint of amusement. They were not used to seeing a human in their royal chambers, let alone one about to marry into their bloodline. The thought made Jack's throat tighten. This was not the kind of adventure he had ever dreamed of. As he reached the center of the platform, King Rat-Halos stepped forward, his deep voice echoing through the hall. "Today, we gather to witness the joining of two souls," he intoned. "By the ancient laws of our people, a life-saving debt must be repaid with an eternal bond. This human, Jack Thompson of Terra, has saved the life of my daughter, and now, by our customs, he shall be bound to her as her consort." There was a murmur of approval from the gathered nobles, though Jack could sense the underlying tension. They did not approve of a human being part of their royal family, but they would never dare challenge the king's decision. "Step forward, human," Rat-Halos commanded. Jack obeyed, stepping onto the platform, his eyes fixed on the floor. He could feel the weight of the circlet on his head, a constant reminder of what was about to happen. When he finally looked up, his gaze met that of Princess Talia. For the first time, he got a clear look at her face. The rumors hadn't lied. Talia was not what anyone would call traditionally beautiful, at least not by Valtorian or even human standards. Her features were sharp, her skin an odd shade of pale green, and her eyes were larger than most, giving her an alien, almost eerie appearance. But there was something about her, something deeper than her outward appearance, that caught Jack off guard. Despite her strange looks, her eyes held a depth of intelligence and strength that he hadn't expected. They were filled with the weight of someone who had spent her entire life under the burden of a curse she could not escape. For a moment, their eyes locked, and Jack felt a strange sense of understanding pass between them. She hadn't chosen this any more than he had. They were both trapped by circumstances beyond their control. "Do you, Jack Thompson, accept the bond of eternal life with my daughter, Princess Talia?" Rat-Halos's voice broke the silence, pulling Jack back to the present moment. Jack swallowed hard, his mouth suddenly dry. He glanced at Talia again, seeing the flicker of vulnerability in her eyes despite her stoic expression. This was it. There was no turning back. I do," Jack said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "And do you, Princess Talia, accept the bond of eternal life with this human, Jack Thompson?" Talia hesitated for the briefest of moments before nodding. "I do," she said, her voice soft but steady. With their vows spoken, the ceremonial binding began. A Valtorian priest, dressed in elaborate robes, stepped forward, holding a thin, glowing blade. The blade hummed with energy as he traced it across Jack's wrist, making a shallow cut that glowed with a faint blue light. The same was done to Talia, and then their wrists were pressed together, the energy from the cuts intertwining and creating a luminous bond that pulsed with power. The room was silent as the priest chanted ancient words in the Valtorian tongue, words that Jack couldn't understand but felt deep in his bones. The energy between him and Talia grew stronger, swirling around them like an invisible force, binding their lives together in a way that transcended mere physical union. When the ceremony was complete, the energy faded, leaving only a faint glow where their wrists had been joined. "It is done," Rat-Halos declared, his voice filled with authority. "The bond is sealed. From this day forth, Jack Thompson is royal consort of the Valtorian Empire, and he shall stand beside my daughter, Princess Talia, as her equal." The room erupted into polite applause, though Jack could sense the unease behind it. The nobles might have accepted the ceremony, but that didn't mean they liked it. He could feel their eyes on him, judging, waiting to see if this human would falter under the weight of his new title. But as Jack looked at Talia, still standing beside him, he realized something important. This wasn't just a political union or a repayment of a life debt. They were both outsiders, both trapped in roles they hadn't chosen. And maybe, just maybe, they could help each other survive in this strange new world they now shared. After the ceremony, Jack was led back to his quarters to rest before the evening celebrations. His mind was still reeling from the events of the day, but for the first time, he felt a small flicker of hope. Talia was not what he had expected, but neither was she the monster the rumors had made her out to be. There was a strength in her, a resilience that he found oddly comforting. As he sat by the window, staring out at the endless expanse of space, Jack couldn't help but wonder what the future held. He was no longer just an engineer from Earth. He was now a member of the most powerful royal family in the galaxy, married to a woman who carried the weight of a centuries-old curse. And whether he liked it or not, his life would never be the same. Chapter 4. The Galactic Emperor. The night after the wedding was filled with dreams Jack could barely comprehend. His mind raced between memories of his former life and the stark reality of what awaited him now being a royal consort to an alien princess and, possibly, something far more than that. The responsibility that weighed on him felt like a heavy, invisible chain that was only tightening with each passing moment. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes of a throne, a crown, and battlefields strewn across galaxies. When Jack awoke, the cold steel of the royal ship's interior greeted him, a far cry from the warmth of the Terran sun he had known back on Earth. He had thought the ceremony would be the hardest part, but now, as reality set in, he knew that his challenges were just beginning. Sitting up, he looked across the room and saw Talia standing near the window, staring out at the stars. "Couldn't sleep?" Jack asked, his voice cutting through the stillness. Talia turned slowly, her face illuminated by the faint glow of the cosmos beyond. "Sleep has never been easy for me," she replied quietly, her gaze unreadable. "Too many thoughts." Jack swung his legs over the side of the bed, the weight of the ceremonial circlet he still wore pressing lightly against his head. "I can relate," he said with a small smile, though it faded quickly. "What happens now?" Talia moved away from the window and sat in the chair opposite him, her hands clasped in front of her. "Now," she said slowly, "we face the world together, and it won't be kind." Jack ran a hand through his hair, trying to make sense of everything. "I didn't expect any of this. One day, I'm fixing engines, and the next, I'm married to the princess of the most powerful empire in the galaxy." Talia tilted her head slightly, studying him. "And how do you feel about that?" Jack looked at her, the intensity of her alien eyes unnerving him, but he pushed through the discomfort. "Honestly, I don't know. You seem like, well, someone I could get along with. But this? The politics, the expectations, the war that's brewing? I didn't sign up for that." Talia's gaze softened for the briefest moment, though her expression remained controlled. "Neither did I," she admitted. "But we are both bound by duty now. Whether we like it or not, the future of the Empire will depend on our actions." Before Jack could respond, a sharp chime echoed through the room. The doors slid open, revealing a group of royal guards, led by the ever-stoic General Karvok. His face was as impassive as ever, though Jack sensed a barely concealed disdain in his eyes. "Consort Jack," Karvok said with a clipped tone, "His Majesty has summoned you both to the war room. There are urgent matters that require your attention." War room? Jack's stomach twisted. He had barely gotten through the wedding, and now he was being pulled into military matters? What was Radhalos thinking? Talia rose gracefully from her seat, her demeanor calm as ever. "We will attend immediately," she said, her voice carrying the authority of a royal. She glanced at Jack, her eyes telling him that there was no room for hesitation. Jack stood up, his heart pounding in his chest, and followed Talia and the guards out of the room. As they made their way through the corridors of the royal vessel, the walls gleamed with a mixture of cold metal and ornate Valtorian designs, a stark reminder of the Empire's military prowess and cultural grandeur. The ship hummed with energy as they neared the war room, the sound a constant reminder that he was no longer aboard the simple freighters he once knew. When they entered the war room, Jack's breath caught in his throat. The chamber was massive, with a high ceiling that seemed to stretch endlessly above them. In the center of the room was a large holographic display of the galaxy, with key planets and sectors marked in bold colors. Around the display stood King Radhalos, surrounded by a cadre of advisors, generals, and military strategists. "Ah, there you are," Radhalos said as they entered, his booming voice filling the room. He wore his battle armor now, a dark, imposing set of plates adorned with Valtorian sigils and engravings. His eyes flicked toward Jack, and for the first time, Jack sensed something more than the usual cold authority. Was it trust? "Join us." Jack exchanged a quick glance with Talia, who nodded subtly before they both approached the central table. "As you know," Radhalos began, addressing both Jack and Talia, "the Arcanes Federation has been a thorn in the side of our empire for far too long. Our conflict with them has reached a critical point. Their forces have been gathering at the border of the Galactic system, and intelligence suggests they are preparing for an all-out assault. Jack listened carefully, trying to process the gravity of the situation. The Arcanes Federation. He had heard of them, an alliance of star systems that had been a rival to the Voltorians for centuries. Their technological advancements were nearly on par with the Empire's, but what they lacked in sheer military might, they made up for in cunning strategy. If they were preparing for a full-scale attack, the consequences could be devastating. "What's the plan?" Talia asked, her tone measured but serious. Rat Halo's motioned to the holographic map. "We will take the fight to them. The Valtorian fleet will engage their forces head-on in the Galactic system, where we can exploit their weaknesses. However, I will need my generals and advisors focused on the tactical aspects of the battle." Jack Dash, he turned his attention to his new son-in-law. "You will accompany me on the flagship. As royal consort, your presence will show the galaxy that you stand with us. And in battle, you will prove your worth." Jack's blood ran cold. "In battle?" he echoed, trying to keep his voice steady. "Your Majesty, I'm not Dash. You are now a part of this empire," Rat Halo said firmly, his gaze unwavering. "You will be expected to fight for it." Jack felt the weight of the words settle heavily on his shoulders. His entire life, he had been a fixer, not a fighter. But now, in the blink of an eye, he was being thrust into a war he barely understood, with the lives of millions at stake. How could he possibly contribute? "You will be at my side," Talia said softly, her voice carrying a quiet reassurance. "You are not alone in this." Jack looked at her, and for the first time since their marriage, he saw not just the cursed princess he had heard so much about, but a strong, capable leader who was willing to stand by him. Perhaps, in some strange way, they were bound by more than just tradition. "All right," Jack said, nodding slowly. "I'll be there." The Valtorian fleet emerged from hyperspace like a dark tide, hundreds of sleek, black warships cutting through the void as they approached the Galactic system. Jack stood on the bridge of the Valtorian Wrath, the Empire's flagship, his hands gripping the rail in front of him as the stars streaked by. The tension in the air was palpable. All around him, Valtorian officers moved with practiced precision, issuing commands and preparing the ship for battle. The fleet was on high alert, and Jack could feel the hum of power beneath his feet as the ship's weapons systems came online. Talia stood beside him, her posture rigid but calm, her battle armor gleaming in the low light. "Stay close to me," she said quietly, her eyes scanning the displays in front of them. "When the fighting starts, do exactly as I say." Jack nodded, though his heart was racing. He had never been in a battle before, certainly not one on this scale. But there was no turning back now. Ahead of them, the Galactic system loomed large, its twin suns casting a pale glow over the battlefield. The Arcanes fleet was already there, a massive array of ships that dwarfed anything Jack had ever seen. Their vessels were sleek and angular, bristling with weapons that glowed ominously in the darkness of space. "We're outnumbered," Jack said under his breath, his voice tense. "We always are," Talia replied, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "But we've never lost." The Valtorian Wrath led the charge, its engines roaring to life as the fleet surged forward. All around them, the other Valtorian ships moved in perfect formation, their sleek designs a testament to the Empire's technological superiority. The first volley of laser fire erupted from the Arcanes fleet, streaking across the void toward the Valtorian ships. The shields of the Valtorian Wrath flared to life, absorbing the impact with a crackling burst of energy. "Shields holding," one of the officers reported, his voice calm despite the chaos unfolding around them. "Return fire," Rat Halos ordered, his voice steady and commanding. The Valtorian fleet unleashed a barrage of firepower, beams of bright energy lancing through space as they tore into the enemy ships. Explosions erupted across the battlefield, illuminating the darkness with flashes of light and debris. The battle was intense, chaotic, and overwhelming. Jack stood frozen for a moment, watching as explosions rippled across the battlefield, lighting up the void of space. The Valtorian fleet was holding its own, but the Arcanes forces were relentless, their ships darting in and out of formation with deadly precision. "Shields at 70%, one of the bridge officers called out. King Rat Halos stood at the center of the command deck, his presence radiating authority. "Maintain formation," he ordered, his voice calm despite the intensity of the battle. "Our primary objective is to cripple their command ship. Once their leadership falls, the rest of the fleet will scatter." Jack could feel the tension mounting as the Valtorian Wrath pushed deeper into the heart of the battle. The ship shuddered with each impact, but its shields held strong. All around him, Valtorian officers worked with disciplined efficiency, issuing commands and coordinating strikes against the enemy fleet. Talia, standing beside Jack, glanced at him with a steely resolve in her eyes. "Stay focused," she said, her voice low but firm. "This battle will decide the future of the Empire." Jack nodded, though his heart was pounding in his chest. He had never been in a situation like this before, and the sheer scale of the conflict was almost too much to comprehend. But Talia's presence gave him a strange sense of reassurance. She was calm, collected, and entirely in control. In that moment, Jack realized that despite the rumors about her appearance, Talia was a true leader, someone born to command in the face of overwhelming odds. Suddenly, the ship jolted violently, nearly knocking Jack off his feet. Alarms blared throughout the bridge as the Valtorian Wrath was hit by a barrage of enemy fire. "Shields down to 50%, a technician shouted, panic creeping into his voice. Jack gripped the railing tightly, feeling the tremors run through the ship's hull. The battle was growing fiercer by the second, and the Arcanes fleet was showing no signs of slowing down. "We need to take out that command ship," Rathalos growled, slamming his fist onto the control panel. "Focus all firepower on their flagship. Bring it down." The Valtorian Wrath shifted its trajectory, angling toward the massive Arcanes flagship that loomed in the distance. The enemy ship was a formidable sight, an enormous, angular vessel bristling with weapons, its hull glowing with energy shields. As the Valtorian fleet closed in, the command ship retaliated with a devastating volley of fire. Bright streaks of energy tore through the void, crashing into the Valtorian ships with terrifying force. Several smaller vessels were instantly destroyed, their remains scattering like dust into the darkness. Jack's stomach twisted as he watched the destruction unfold. The sheer power of the Arcanes fleet was staggering, and for the first time, he began to understand just how precarious the situation truly was. If they failed here, the Empire could fall. "Consort Jack," Rathalos barked, snapping him out of his thoughts. "You may be new to this, but you're not useless. Get to the secondary weapons control station. I need you there now." Jack hesitated for only a second before nodding. He didn't know much about military tactics, but he knew technology. If there was anything he could do to help, he would. He sprinted across the bridge, weaving through officers and technicians, and made his way to the weapons control station at the rear of the bridge. When he reached the console, he quickly familiarized himself with the system. It was more advanced than anything he had worked with before, but the basics were the same: targeting, power allocation, and firing controls. His engineering background kicked in, and he started adjusting the power flow to the ship's weapons, boosting their efficiency. "We need more power to the forward cannons," Jack called out to the crew. "Divert energy from non-essential systems and focus everything on our main guns." The technicians followed his instructions, rerouting power to the weapons as Jack coordinated the attack. The Valtorian Wrath unleashed a devastating barrage of energy blasts, striking the enemy flagship with precise, concentrated fire. The Arcanes ship's shields flared, absorbing the damage, but Jack could see that they were weakening. "We're breaking through," Talia shouted, her voice filled with determination. The Valtorian fleet pressed the advantage, hammering the enemy command ship with everything they had. Slowly, but surely, the Arcanes flagship's defenses began to falter. Its shields flickered, and then, with a final, shattering explosion, the enemy ship's shields collapsed entirely. "Now!" Rathalos roared. "Finish them!" Jack's hands flew over the control panel, directing the final strike. The Valtorian Wrath's main cannons fired, and a massive beam of energy lanced through the void, striking the Arcanes flagship directly in its core. The ship's hull buckled under the impact, and for a brief moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then, in a blinding explosion of light and fire, the Arcanes command ship erupted into a massive fireball, its remains scattering across the battlefield. The entire Valtorian bridge erupted into cheers, the sound of victory echoing through the ship. Jack felt a surge of relief wash over him, his heart still racing from the intensity of the battle. They had done it. They had won. King Radhalos turned to face the crew, his eyes blazing with pride. "The Arcanes Federation is broken," he declared, his voice booming. "Today, we have secured the future of our empire. Let this victory be a reminder to all who would challenge us. We are Volturians, and we will not be defeated." The crew cheered again, their voices filled with triumph. But as the celebration continued, Radhalos stepped closer to Jack, his expression softening just slightly. "You've proven yourself today, Jack," the king said, his tone surprisingly warm. "You may not have been born into this world, but you are a part of it now. You fought for the empire, and you've earned your place among us." Jack nodded, still catching his breath. "Thank you, your majesty." Rathalos's gaze shifted to Talia, who was watching the exchange with a faint smile on her lips. "And you, my daughter," the king continued, his voice filled with pride. "You have shown the strength of a true Valtorian warrior. Your leadership and courage are what will carry this empire forward." Talia bowed her head respectfully. "Thank you, father." As the adrenaline from the battle began to fade, Jack felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. The war wasn't over, but this victory had given him a new sense of purpose. He wasn't just an outsider anymore. He was a part of something greater, a family, a legacy, and an empire that spanned the stars. Later, as the Valtorian fleet regrouped and the remnants of the Arcanes forces fled into the far reaches of space, Jack stood on the observation deck of the Valtorian Wrath. The stars stretched out before him, infinite and unknowable, but for the first time, they didn't seem quite so daunting. Talia joined him, her presence quiet but comforting. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the distant stars. "You did well today," she said finally, her voice soft but sincere. Jack smiled, though it was tinged with exhaustion. "I couldn't have done it without you." Talia turned to face him, her alien eyes catching the light of the stars. "We are bound now, Jack," she said quietly, "by tradition, by duty, and by something more. Whatever the future holds, we will face it together." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had been thrust into a world he didn't understand, married to a woman he barely knew, and now, after everything, he was more than just a consort. He was a partner, a leader, and whether he was ready for it or not, a part of the Valtorian royal family. As they stood together, gazing out into the endless expanse of space, Jack couldn't help but wonder what the future held. There would be more battles, more challenges, and more responsibilities. But whatever came next, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't alone.